You are live.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions. Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan, along with, and we got to turn his mic up.
Test. There we go. Usually you test before the show, but during the show is just as effective. When you get here, not 5 minutes to
that's
go,
just what they're expecting you.
You're not supposed to talk about pre-production issues. I got here right on time. I was here on time, just like I always am for everything.
Thanksgiving later.
Yeah.
Don't make me turn
Tom.
the Don't make me
Tom's
turn
got
the
my
show
back
around.
over here.
Don't. All right. Detroit City of Champions. It's the podcast. There's a trilogy of books written by Charles Avison, and it's Detroit City of Champions, and it's chronicling the 1935 year in sports history, Detroit sports history. Just astounding. 33 championships won, and just amazing stuff. And in his travels, Charles came across many people to help him tell this story. And one of those people, we've been digging into his radio archive of just some amazing pieces of print and then some astounding pieces of audio that Tom Eurich was able to gather. Tom, thanks for being back with us.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and you just can't get enough of the City of Champions. It's phenomenal, and when I go out, I tell people, and they just are amazed. I said, you got to get Charles' book. You'll hear it all.
Yeah, Tom's been great, man. It's like I mean, I've known him for how long? About 10 years now.
Easy.
Yeah, and it's just Tom's like, the biggest supporter for me, but just the City of Champions in general. Like I always talk about, whenever I talk about Tom, I always say, this man was bitten by the bug, just like I was. Once you get bit by the City of Champions bug, there's just you're done. I mean, it's just such a fascinating story, and it grips you.
But we talk about the City of Champions story being the most forgotten story, the most important story in sports history, and your books are an argument for that it is.
Well, I'd say the most important season in Detroit sports history, without a doubt. Make sure we say, I say Detroit. You know what I mean? Because of the impact that it had on this city and on this state. Yeah.
I'd say it's important in sports history.
Sure.
It's one of the most important.
Oh, I think it's the greatest season in American sport history. But as far with regards to its importance, there's no season in the history of Detroit sports that had more of an impact on Detroit than this one year.
Well, without a doubt.
Yep.
Yeah. And we say it's a forgotten because it pretty much has been, and the pieces of tape that we were listening to, Tom, you were able to attend a banquet that was held on the 50th anniversary of the 1935 championship.
The Lions' first championship, and he was the only media there.
And
where are the mainstream press? Where are they at? There was nobody there for that event. Nobody was there for that event. Don Shula is speaking at the event
as a surprise guest.
True, but at the same time, you've got 50th anniversary of the Lions' first championship. And you know what I mean? Tom is there's no other media there. You know what I mean? Like Tom is the only, these tapes that we're playing on this show right now. This is the only, actual firsthand information to come out of this incredible event. You know?
Matter of fact, the newspapers did come in '85. I was checking the weekend that they were there. There was no story
about the event.
Nothing.
Nothing. No. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. No recollection of this. That's the most puzzling thing when we say forgotten, Jamie. When I say almost kind of sort of forgotten, this story was forgotten. In my initial study, again, I want to take everybody back to when I first heard about this story. All right, I was a senior at Western in an apartment. Okay, me and my two friends, Jeremy Hunter and Kevin Bush, were hanging out in my apartment, and we were just going through this old Detroit Tiger media guide, and we came across this random fact on the 19th. I didn't even know what year the Tigers had won their first championship, and we were going through the thing and going through the book, and we looked it up, 1935. Sure enough, and then the bottom of the page with a little asterisk, it says, "Did you know that the Lions and Red Wings also won their championships in this season?" And I was like, I never heard that. That's kind of cool. And I was taking a sports history class at that moment and needed a topic to choose. And so I chose this just to find out, find out a little bit more about it. And that's when I went to the original books. I had to write a 2-page paper. 2 pages. And keep in mind, I had just come back from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, one of the foremost history colleges in the world for studying history. And I have to write a 2-page paper about a Detroit sports topic. Okay. And when I try to write a 2-page paper, I just go, just like anything. You go to the books, you go to the internet, you go to, these different, your basics, search functions. And I could not find enough information to fill a 2-page paper. Man. I'm either a horrendous historian, I'm either a horrendous researcher, learn nothing along my ways about how to look up a story of a simple 2-page book report, or there's literally nothing there. And if there's no information on something, if there's no information to remind modern day people who are no longer there, then that's by definition, this is a story that has been literally forgotten.
Right. And you've resurrected it.
That we've been trying
with these books.
This was the first, in my mind, this was the step. The first step was to isolate exactly, to nail down factual evidence of what took place. That was the first step, was to build a cornerstone around, because there's all this like mythology around it. Like, oh, they won how many championships? I don't know. Who did what? I don't know. Are you sure there was 30? 33 sounds a bit ridiculous. Are you sure there's that many? Yes, there were. And I went through every single one, presented the evidence, systematically going through it. Now, so the goal of this book was to focus on this season and to identify, fact from fiction, and to say what happened in 1935. That was my goal, was to establish a foundation of fact. And upon that fact, now it's the job of everybody that hears this story or reads the story to others like this, to help bring, to bring the story back, now we're in the effort of bringing the story back to the modern day. And again, I point to the evidence which is in these books to say, yes, the story happened, and now it's time to bring it back, And
it is great. I mean, you can scour YouTube and you'll find some clips of some vintage football, and you'll find some vintage Portsmouth clips, and you'll find some vintage Lions clips. From the day. And actually, it was Tom and I were talking about this before the show. Thanksgiving is a big Detroit tradition. And it began with the football game, which was the very first season for the Lions here.
1934. Yeah, exactly.
And the first broadcast.
Yeah, the first coast-to-coast broadcast. Exactly.
Across the whole country.
Yep, exactly.
So that was pretty interesting. And then we were commenting that they finally acknowledged it. The 34 year, but they didn't mention the championship in 35. So they had a picture of the game. It's like, and the Lions lost. And it's like, but they won the next year against that same team, and then they won the championship.
And that game
and they
was
left
huge.
That, and they left that, and they let that go.
Yeah. And they showed a picture of Richards on that tilt. Yeah. Did you watch the game?
I watched a chunk of it. I can't even handle it.
Well, I came back.
I mean, it's not. I'm still a fan, but
we got a new coach now.
Like I was actually hanging out with my parents, and I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I see it in the corner. I can see the alerts coming through my phone. I'm just happy to sit this kind of,
Well, they
I didn't see it. Yeah,
they played the Bears this week with the new coach.
But that was interesting that they finally, it's like, because with the world in the shape that it's in, with the the COVID and the lockdown, there's less fodder for the little features that they do. Yeah, and so they had to scrape the barrel back to 1934.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
It's like, oh, we don't have enough.
Whenever the teams are doing terrible, they do it's a classic. Dodge, where the teams, they celebrate their history when they got nothing in the present to celebrate. I mean, that's a classic, I say Dodge, but that's a classic way to sell your product. And of course, they got to reach back into 1930s, the 34 Thanksgiving. Yeah. But But that's what I'm saying. Like, all of a sudden it's relevant to mention the 1934 Lions. Why not go a little further?
One more year.
Start talking about
one more year.
The entire situation. But they don't know about it. So how can they?
Yeah. But they mentioned Portsmouth on the program.
They did.
Broadcast.
They did.
And that darn near fell off my chair. I said, hey, there we go.
Everyone says, I'm glad to hear that. But I'm saying, like, whenever all of a sudden it becomes relevant to talk about something like this, like you would think that they would take an advantage and say, and by the way, the very next year, like you're saying, Jamie, they won it all. It was the greatest season ever.
And it was their first championship.
Yeah, but the problem is, once again, this story is not in no shape. I mean, there's people that are listening to this now. There's people that we've all talked to. There's people that we've, have read the books and things like this. A very small percentage of people that didn't know previously are now, now know about it. But as far as a mainstream story, you will not find anyone. You will not find any mainstream, like big name Detroit sports presenter anywhere that's going to even it's going to say, did you know that the 35 that they won in all in 1935? They don't talk about it. It's not a mainstream subject, and that's what's so insane. Like, how is it not?
There was an article saying our teams let us down exactly when we needed them most. And it was kind of bagging on Detroit sports right now.
What do you mean? Oh, right now?
Yeah, right now.
Oh, okay.
They're talking about our current teams because people need something uplifting. People need something to do. You can't go to the games, but you can watch them. And people need that right now. And they're saying, they're letting us down when we need them the most. And I'm like, but there's great stories out there that you guys could be telling. And you're ignoring.
And the thing about these stories is, and I've said it, this is one of the main components of what I believe is the idea of history. People say life doesn't come with an instruction manual. That may be true, but that's
called history. Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying. History, it can be a blueprint. And a lot of people say, well, history, if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. But there's also a more positive note for that, which is to say, if you learn what people did in the past, how they did it, what they did, then you can stand on their shoulders and achieve something greater than they never could have dreamed. So you can replicate their the successes of the past.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, there is so much to be learned with regards to not only how the teams won it, but the psychology of the fans and how the fans ended up playing a major role in this. Like, the fans, gave this energy, they needed something too at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the energy, the teams fed. We talked about this, the article in the book before, where a writer from the time actually tries to explore why they had won.
Right.
And he actually says it's because when these players went out there, these fans were just craving something to get excited about. So when the teams went out there and these fans are just going insane for every single success, then it lifted these players up. Like, the players could do no wrong. Yeah. And we've seen that before. We've seen elements of that throughout the history of Detroit sports. 68, 84, like all these different, championships where the fans are just so engaged.
Mm-hmm.
They know everything about every single player. They know every idiosyncrasy that comes up. And that's one of these things that these teams tapped into. The fans of this time were absolutely just intense about every single one of these players, and it lifted them up.
And you got to remember, it was a depression in those days too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, they're looking for something.
Yeah, and that was their life soul, the sports.
Well, especially when the teams started playing even remotely well, just slightly well, then the fans got excited. They got something to go, get excited about, and then that enthusiasm in the fans. Again, they call it the 12th man. When the fans impact the games, and they actually give credit to that in this. That these fans, like the players of this time, could do no wrong. They could do no wrong. And so I'm saying, these are the kind of components that if you, how the psychology of the fans can actually help, impact these games. And that's what I'm saying. These are elements that are not where the fact that the overall story is unknown is one thing, but the loss of the story negates all of the potential learning experiences that could be drawn from it.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. It's foolish to not remember this story. Maybe one of the missing components of the current Detroit sports is to bring back this story and incorporate it into the modern day, mindset, to celebrate what once was, and to bring, there's all kinds of, the older I get, man, they talk about unseen forces behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Potentially cross the boundaries of magic, there's things out there that we cannot explain. What would it mean to have this incredible story to be brought back in the spirit of this, backing these modern day teams and such. So it can't hurt anyways.
Yeah. And Tom, you were the one person listening to this voice and capturing this story on the 50th anniversary. And otherwise, it would have just totally slipped past. It would have just been a bunch of guys having dinner at the Hilton, and that would have been that. So
I was very honored. I was brought by Ed Kushner. He seated me down. He told me to come early to interview the different players. They sat at two different tables. I related that earlier in the program, and it was an honor. When I talked to those players, I wasn't even born in 35.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was born in 41, so I was 6 years spot.
Yeah.
But my father talked about them, and he talked about the City of Champions, but he didn't know who they all were.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say, is that a lot of times, the story that has been passed on to us to this day, you hear somebody like, oh, yeah, usually when I'm at an art show, and I've told the story, conservatively estimated, I actually said it in my second book. I wrote that second book came out in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I estimated that I'd talked to 80,000 people regarding this story. 80,000. That was a conservative estimate at that time. Yeah. And over the course of all those times, anytime the rare, like it was so rare to ever talk to anybody that had ever even heard of this story. I mean, my sign says, "Did you know?" I mean, it was almost like it was a trivia question that's what brought people in. They're going, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I hear that all day long. I didn't know that. It was like, I don't even know, 1 out of 40 or 1 out of 50, something like that would ever even have heard of it. And those that did, they had only heard it from like their dad or their grandpa. There was no books. They had just heard it like, oh, somebody told me that somewhere. But it was, so that's what I'm saying. Like, it was always like a somebody knew told each other, and that's why that one person had known it. But that's something like there was no like factual basis, like a root of foundation of fact, that like I'm saying, like that, like yourself, like your dad told you about it, but where's he didn't even know how many champions.
Well, he kept talking about it, and I kept asking him, who were all the champions? He didn't know,
and he lived during that time.
And he lived
what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
He knew the three basics, and he loved Joe Louis.
Sure,
but after that, and maybe Walter Hagen, that might have been it.
But that's what I'm saying. After, and then so that take that Tom's example right there as an example, is that after this happens, World War II happens.
Right.
Like shortly, this story ends in 1936. And shortly thereafter, 1939, Hitler invades. This when war in Europe begins, and then 41, of course, is when the U.S. enters.
Yep.
And so there's a World War II. Well, there's far bigger events going on that people were talking about in sports. And so then when the U.S. comes back from war, of course, there's the golden era of the 1950s with Gordie Howe, Bobby Lane, championships all over the place.
Yep.
Hell, even the Tigers won a championship in 1945, right when we come back from war.
Yeah.
5 weeks after the war is over, the Tigers are World Series champions.
Right.
And the auto industry comes back. There's a golden era of Detroit. And so these stories got put in a drawer and filed away. Like, we'll come back to another time. There's way more cool stuff going on right now. And they never came back to it.
I think they wanted to forget. They had the Depression.
That too.
Then they have the war. They went from one mess to another.
Yeah.
And when they all came home, they forgot what the mess was.
And the other thing too is that people that would have attended games with their like brothers, fathers, whatever like this, maybe some of these people didn't come back from war. Maybe these people that are tinged with some of these great memories that they had are now like sacred, like I don't even want to talk about this because my brother never came home. I never got a chance to, I went to the championship game with him and I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
These Great Depression stories were tinged in sadness. And so that's what I mean. Like, there's so many different reasons. And that's what I mean. Like, but it may, like, say now is the time to bring it back.
Yeah.
What harm can there be?
I talked to one person that went to the 1935 game. I told you that.
Oh, remind me.
Yeah. It was my stockbroker's father. He went to the game in 1935.
Which one? Tigers?
Yeah. No, out at UAD.
Oh, Lions.
The Lions.
Okay.
And
I forgot, Tom. We're talking Lions here, man.
And
his
like
the game.
And his favorite player was Ernie Caddell.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the money to buy a shirt, so he had an old sweatshirt. And his
that's right. You're okay.
I told you. She put a number 1 on it and took to school. Now, in 35, in those days, they didn't have the sports radio. And when on a tape, when I played Ernie Caddell's voice, he cried.
Yeah, that is so.
And he wore that shirt all the time because I gave him one City of Champions, and he was so proud of that.
Well, what's so cool is that he's actually fashioning his own jersey with Caddell's number 1. Nowadays it's just it's people go to the store, they buy a whatever Matt Stafford jersey, whatever it is. And that's just something you just do. But he's actually making his own back before that was even in fashion.
In the 30s, it wasn't in existence. So his mother made him a shirt, and he went to school with Ernie Caddell.
He's Caddell.
And all of those years that he played, he never heard his voice and when he heard it, he went bonkers.
But if you think a little bit deeper into that story you're talking about, then Tom, you know what I mean? Like, is the idea that there's the idea of like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? What came first? Did teams start issuing jerseys with the team numbers to sell, or did fans just start making their own jerseys because they wanted to be their favorite player, and then people saw it and were like, "That's a good idea. We're going to sell them."
Yeah.
So I think, that opens up a whole nother concept, which is like maybe potentially. Like I say, what came first? Were fans making their own jerseys? Teams saw and go, "We're going to start selling those things." That's what I'm saying. Like, he just made his own. Like, I can't imagine that at that time that they're selling jerseys like that.
Well, it was Depression. It was they just didn't have the sports memorabilia that they have today with all of the shirts. And,
And one of the big gifts that the Lions got after the championship was that they got parkas, like team parkas, as a reward for their championship. Like, like nowadays you get these like multi-million-dollar bonuses. And these guys are back then. I read an article where they were, I think it was Press Now. One of those guys were talking about that it was like, man, we were so happy. We got these like, Detroit Lions parka, to wear after the game. And I was like, that's so I can't imagine that they're issuing jerseys for kids at that time.
Well, not in the 30s. No. Heck, he didn't have enough to put money on the food on the table.
Exactly.
Buy the jersey.
That's what I'm saying. When a player when they get a parka for winning a championship.
Curious what those parkas look like.
Was
they embroidered, stitched, or what?
Yeah, I have a feeling it was pretty rugged. Like, your basic blue with the Lions. But my God, dude, if you had a 1935 championship Lions parka, dude. What do you want for it? I will give you.
Do you know who did hear about this whole? Do you know who did hear about the City of Champions?
What do you mean?
Actually, Catherine Mitchell popped in. She said, "I heard it from Charles Avison."
Oh, that's my sister.
Yeah,
hey, Catherine. Roll. Yeah, how you doing, Catherine? It's my sister. I love her. I love her to death.
Oh. I would hope she had heard about it from you.
Yeah, she heard it from me. Yeah. A lot of people heard it. I got, like I say, 80,000, people that I've talked to, but definitely my sister. I told my sister at some point too. She's among I counted her in the 80,000.
But talking about the parkas, and in your conversation with the players that were there that evening, you were able to touch on several topics, and one was about the equipment. But let's get back to the tape. Let's go to the tape.
Yeah.
I think Elmer, what's the next piece you wanted to look at?
Well, it's actually, this is 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to listen to this clip so much that I remember it 2 weeks after we played the last clips, because it was like the next clip in the chain. And it's just, I just
from Elmer.
From Elmer, because it refreshed our memory what we were talking about. Because actually a previous couple of discussions on there talked about the equipment, but I like what Elmer Fair Ward had said. So, and I think we got a picture to put up for anybody that's watching the show.
Pictures. Do we have what do we got to?
Elmer, I think I sent you a picture of Elmer, Bear Ward to put up there. If you have it available. It's not. I don't think it's essential, but it was one of the last pictures that I gave you.
All right.
Okay, I'm happy to be back this way, and don't go away. We're going to go around again. I want to ask you some more questions, Elmer. I think the difference between now and when we played in 35 is we went both ways, both defense and offense. And as a center, and we used a single wing, it meant from the center position that you had to put the lead passes or line buck. The pass from center was a great deal different than it is today. In those days when we played, we never had any face masks. We used the leather helmet, and I think it was quite a bit different. I remember one thing that Potsy always said: if no one was ahead of us the third quarter, he wasn't going to beat us in the fourth, because condition is what he meant. And we used to run the sprints, and we were all in real good shape. And I think primarily that is a difference. We only had 25 men on our team, and many times we had 4 or 5 injuries, but that meant that we had to play with 17 or 18 players. I think that's a big difference from today. We run just as hard, I think, and tackle just as hard, and the rules haven't changed a great deal.
So, that was interesting, because we pointed out that in the 1934 game, championship game, there were some rules that came into play that
the 32,
the
Chicago
32
Stadium.
game.
That's what led to a bunch of new rule changes.
Yeah, there was a lot of rules that came into
because
play.
Of the
that
indoor game,
yeah,
the indoor game.
Yeah, that was interesting. But from then, from 32 and 35 to 50 years later, a lot of the rules had stayed very similar.
Well, those were the game. I mean, if we're going back to the 32 game, some of the biggest rules. That almost defined modern football to this day. We're talking about the 32 game. There was the just right off the top, right off the bat, you're talking about when the main touchdown that got scored in the game was Bronco Nagurski crashing the line and jumping up, throwing a pop pass to Red Grange for the touchdown.
Right.
And back at that point, you had to throw up, all passes had to be thrown from 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And Bronco, it was totally blew that rule.
Yeah.
And so after that, the NFL goes, well, from now on, as long as you're behind the line of scrimmage, that's all that matters. And so that was a major thing.
Yeah.
It's anybody behind, as long as you're behind the line, you can
that turned the game.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, which is also not to be diminished, is the hash marks. The hash marks on a field. Nowadays when a game starts, when a play concludes, the ball is moved to the nearest hash mark or the center of the field. Where no matter where, if a guy gets tackled out of bounds, it gets to the right hash mark of the field. Yeah. Back in before that 1932 championship game, if a guy got tackled out of bounds, the ball started like 1 yard from the out of bounds, and so they'd have to run a play just to get to the middle of the field. They would burn a play. And so during that game, because there was the walls of the stadium, they couldn't start with the play that close to the sideline, and so they actually created the hash mark just for that indoor game,
and it continued.
And so, they liked it so much because the teams didn't have to burn a play that that's I'm saying that small change is a big deal.
Well, the only change they made now is they moved the goalpost. In the 50s, I saw a game when Crazy Legs Hirsch was running the post pattern.
Yeah.
The post got him.
Oh, geez. That's what I'm saying. Every time you're watching those old footage,
ran into that post. I'll never forget that. He never knew what hit him.
Talking about ringing your bell, huh?
He said, I was at the post, but there was no ball.
Yeah, but the interesting thing, Elmer's saying though is that one of the things I love what he says is that we ran just as hard, we tackled just as hard, we played just as hard. And so a lot of times people look at, they look at the, players from back in the, in the day and they say, well, it's a different caliber of athletes and all this nowadays. And you're like, are you sure? Because, this is a guy that's seen it both. And he was like, yeah, we tackled just as hard as them,
Yeah.
So that's anyway. So I like that little clip from Bear War because he really goes through like the equipment is different, but he talks about the game is we hit just as hard as they did,
Same field.
Yeah, it's the same football field.
There was an article around Thanksgiving that came out that caught my eye about the some of the greatest players in football. And it was the greatest players. I'll try to find toughest NFL players. This is coming out of Tiebreakers. Tough guys, the toughest players in NFL history. And because I'm not a big sports guy, I've told you guys that before. I like history.
Yeah, but that's what we love it though, Tom,
I love
Detroit.
We're
like, you're soaking it up like a sponge.
Some of these names, I recognize most of these names. But there was only one.
I gotta cut you. For your first sports education to be the City of Champions story, Tom, how much would you love that to be your foundational element for your sports education?
Right.
The City of Champions story is the foundational element.
You cover all the sports.
You start with the City of Champions story and learn everything else. That's
they
how
covered every sport played was covered.
That is it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like your first story you ever know is the City of Champions story, and then you build from there.
Yeah.
That's the greatest sport. Like I'm almost envious of you.
So
I wish I had learned sports history.
But out of these top 30 players, coming in at number 5, Bronco Nagurski.
He's 34. When I interviewed those Lions, they said he was like tackling a redwood tree.
Yeah,
with a bulldozer behind it.
Yeah.
They said he was they feared him.
Yeah, well,
when he had the ball.
When you see, we've actually shown a couple videos of Bronco Nagurski, and you can see in these videos, I check back in old episodes we had, or check, just look up these Bronco Nagurski videos.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the biggest one is look up the 1934 championship game with the New York Giants.
Yeah,
it really shows Bronco Nagurski in action. And this guy built like a redwood tree. This guy was literally he was twice the size of any other guy.
Yeah.
I always call him the Shaquille O'Neal of the 1930s football because, Shaq in his heyday was just so big, you could not stop him. If Shaq was going to dunk the ball, he was going to dunk in your face. Like if you try to block Shaq's shot, he would break your arm when he dunked it. I mean, he broke the rim. Shaq was unstoppable in his heyday, and that's how Bronco was. Like, there's some of these players that just are so unstoppable that you just have to tip your cap to them. There's nothing you can do. And that's what they had to stop. The Lions had to stop Bronco to win a championship.
I asked him who was the toughest player they played against, and it was always Bronco Nagurski. And Chris said every time he got the ball, is it going to be my elbow? Is it to get him down?
The articles that I've read about it, they said that whenever you played the Bears, if you were ever going to try to tackle Bronco Nagurski, you always had to use two guys.
At least
you never wanted to try to if you try to tackle Bronco by yourself, you're breaking a collarbone, he's breaking something on you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's what, anybody that followed like the NBA, when Shaq was so unstoppable in his heyday especially with the Lakers and all this, recognize, like, when the Pistons ended up beating Shaq in the 2004 championship, it was like, the Pistons like built their team around the eventuality that they would have to face Shaq in the 2004 finals and figure out some way to just slow him down. You know what I mean? Like, that team, like, there was one moment during the 2004 season where they actually, Ben Wallace blocked Shaq's shot. And that was like, at that moment, anybody that was really following the Pistons were like, they can beat the Lakers. They can slow him down. They have a chance. And that's what I like to equate that with the Lions of this time because there's year after year after year, it was always the Bears finally, stopping them in their tracks. The Bears were always stopping. They beat them in the first Thanksgiving game. They beat them all the way back to 1932 when they were the Portsmouth Spartans.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, and then 35, they finally beat the Bears. They beat them on Thanksgiving. They tied them the game before Thanksgiving, and then they beat them on Thanksgiving. So they are finally able to overcome Bronco Nagurski. And that's what I mean. Like, that story, the sort of symmetry with that. I like to equate it with the 2004 Pistons, where they were able to finally, figure out a way to at least neutralize Shaq long enough for them to use their own weapons to win, because that's how it was. Yeah, is that they were able to finally figured out a way to, and one of the reasons when they got Chuck Bernard for the 1934 championship, 1934 season, like they got Chuck Bernard in Michigan, was that Chuck Bernard had shown that he was able to stop Bronco by himself because the 34,
you don't have to send three guys after him.
Exactly. Because the way it used to occur was after a team won a championship, the NFL championship, they would play the college all-stars. Okay, so the 1934 championship Bears played the 1934 college all-stars at Chicago Stadium, in Chicago Stadium. So, anyways, Chuck Bernard was in that game. And Chuck Bernard was like one of the greatest college players of all time. Chuck Bernard, Chuck Bernard, my God, man. Anybody that's listening to this podcast, like, stop listening to us right now and go look at no, don't do that. After the show. After the show, look up Chuck Bernard, right? I got a whole section on, but look him up. And it's like he's one of the most decorated collegiate athletes of all time. But one of the things they don't really talk about in the online stuff is that Chuck Bernard in this college all-star game against the Bears took down Bronco Nagurski by himself. And so the Lions are looking at this. I mean, he's already a decorated player, but the Lions made every effort to bring in Chuck Bernard. Was like, if he can bring down, Bronco by himself, this is a stud we need.
Then you're saying there's a chance.
Exactly. And so, but also to recognize too, I want to make sure I put this out there too, is that Claire Randolph on the 1934 Lions, and who had also gone back with the Spartans, Claire Randolph was also known for his ability to stop Bronco Nagurski by himself. All right. So it wasn't like there was nobody that could. There was a couple guys. And I'm pretty certain that that Father Lumpkin, didn't see it written down anywhere this, but Father Lumpkin and Ace Katowski were two tough as nails. Men too, that I have no doubt that they could take it down too.
Well, we also had a guy
against them stopping them.
We also had a guy named Little Chris.
Yeah.
So, and that's the next person you were able to talk to.
Yeah.
Why was he called? Who was Little Chris? Why was he called Little Chris?
Well, there was Big Christensen and there was Little Chris.
I was going to wave like, call me. Don't even answer the question, but Tom's got it.
Yeah, that's him. That's so they called him Little Chris. So that's
and Big Chris is George Christensen, who they nicknamed Tarzan.
Okay.
Right. So his other nickname besides Big Chris is also Tarzan, which also ties you into why they called him Big Chris.
Let's see what Christensen says here.
All right, yeah, let's go.
And Little Chris, by the way, is the team's best punter. Like this guy was one of the incredible. He was a blocking back punter. Yeah. He wasn't just some little miniature guy. He was a great player
too.
He was a blocking back.
I talked to him many times. By phone and by letter.
Yeah, and he was the best punter, better than anybody. He was their best guy. So yeah.
All right, here's Little Chris.
That's Little Chris.
Matt, do we got audio on this?
Yeah. Matt's back to screw around.
No, it's there. I was ready for it.
I know you were back.
No, maybe it was me.
I gotta give you a little harassment.
I gave you some shit when you got here.
Exactly.
So it was me.
You didn't think I love you if I
on
give you a little bit of grief
FCC.
every once in a while.
Yeah. No.
FCC.
Well, I suppose if I were going to talk about the differences in the game today, I would say that in the days we played, money was not a very important thing. We played because we wanted to play. We played for the fun of the game. It was important to get a paycheck, but by no means in the magnitude that they are today. I well remember Jack Johnson, a teammate from Utah, with me. We had negotiated our original contract, and I don't know for what reason I was a back, and I had $135 a game, and Jack had $125. We went in to renegotiate our next year's contract with owner G.A. Richards. We sat down at his desk in his lush office in the Fisher Building, and he said, "Christensen, do you think you're worth more to this team than Jack Johnson?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "By God, neither do I. Jack gets a $10 raise and you stay the same." So I think our teams at that time were so molded together because we were less. We didn't have 50 players, you know. We were, 22 or 23 is all. And we were very close together. I think this bunch here at this meeting realizes so well the relationship that existed 50 years ago. I thank everybody for everything that's gone on here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow.
Let's see. Mahomes got $490 million, and this same player, he got a $10 raise.
Yeah, but here's the thing: I do want there's
same football, same
true,
field.
but there's two things I want to point out about this. All right, is that a lot of times that the players nowadays that get all this money, a lot of times people will castigate them and say all they care about is the money. But I have this feeling that like these players that play this game, like college football and all this different stuff, there's a lot of players that don't play this game for the money. So I don't necessarily think that is like distinguishable just from the 1930s. Like, the 1930s because they got paid less, that they didn't play for the money. Whereas nowadays everybody does play for the money because they get paid so much. I think that these guys, like, you know, at some point, like, money doesn't even really, I mean, it ceases to really, I mean, once you have so much of it, does it really even matter anymore? And they still keep playing. Like a guy like Tom Brady or whatever, like, still keeps on playing. His guys, I mean, if he all he cares was money, like, you get your money. I mean, how many $100 million contracts you need before you're like, I got enough money to last me forever? You know, be like, no, I want one more season because I want the money. You know what I mean? Like, no, the guy's like, I'm going to play until I'm like 40. Because you can see he clearly understands.
So my arm falls off.
Enjoys playing the game.
It's pretty darn close.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'm saying, like, you can see that, you know, these guys, like, you know, money, they get, just because they get paid more money today. Yeah. I don't necessarily think that, I mean, it's just, it was a guy I talked to today that said that, like people that, that people that develop successful businesses, just a random conversation I had with a guy in the store today. He was saying, like, you know, people that develop successful businesses, they, a lot of time, in most cases, it's because they really enjoy what they do. You know, it's not just because they're in it for the money. It's because, you know, the hard times of a business, you know, you're sticking it out because you believe in what you're doing. You're passionate about your thing. And so that's, I mean, the same thing with, I think it's a lot of times with sports. I think that modern day athletes, a lot of times get too many stones thrown at them because they're like, because they get paid so much, like all they care about is the money. It takes a hell of a lot to make to not only just to get to the profession, to pro sports, to the major leagues and baseball, football, whatever. But it takes a hell of a lot to stay there too, and to stay at the top of your profession. So I've always been somebody that's like, it's like I understand that they get more money, but but you have to really love what you do to stick it out, to the point, to where these guys make money. So I never begrudge these guys for how much money they get paid. It's so I don't think he is necessarily either. But
they earn their money. I mean,
sure. Exactly.
It's
they earn their money in the 30s, and they earn their money now. I think I really do. I think that they're massive contracts, but they're also put up on these huge pedestals where everybody is like, they can't even do anything. They can't.
No, you can't even a little dog fight. Come on. What's the problem?
If a guy,
come on. What are we gonna do here?
They can't do anything. They step on the dogs.
Some of those are monsters.
Yeah, they do something. They do anything bad, and everybody in the world hears about the very next second. So like.
Dog fighting's a little messed up.
Well, I'm not. That is. I'm talking about. But no, that's a different example.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, I'd be at a church.
But I'm saying like anything that they do, anything, even like anything, like they have no privacy in their lives. Everything is for the full public. So they're kind of birds in a golden cage.
You can't punch your girlfriend in an elevator.
You're taking it completely the wrong thing. I'm talking about somebody walking out back and stepping in a dog turd or something.
I know.
Everybody, like you're throwing a complete other thing. Like
the really horrific ones that got blown up on TV.
Yeah, but I'm saying like anything. They're like, oh, did you hear what this guy's this stupid thing? Like anything they do is immediately.
Or they're under a microscope. It's like, who's he dating? His wife is dressing him.
Exactly. They're celebrityism. They're part of the celebrity culture.
That's
exactly.
His supermodel wife is dressing
I've
him.
interviewed a lot of football players, Doug English, Joe Schmidt, all of these guys from the 30s, and every one of them will tell you that when they step on that football field, they don't know if it's going to be a wrist, an ankle, a neck.
Sure.
It's they claim, and everyone said the same thing. It's like rolling the dice.
Yeah. But so this brings up sort of the second, this kind of brings up the second, there's like I said, there's two things about what he said that I love. And the second thing I think is fascinating. It was, just a really brief sort of blip about what he said. And so he said, I have it in my notes here, less players meant a closer team bond because, he said even, I have sort of quoted right here where he says, there's 25 players on a team, and then at any given time, there'd be 4 or 5 injuries. So we'd be like, he said, so we'd have like 17 guys like playing, right?
Just
whereas a modern day NFL roster, like I don't have the exact number. I think it's 50. Is it 55? Yeah. So 55 guys. So imagine, just picture the difference in your minds, right? So you got one team, the modern day team, you got 55 players, right? And then you've got, that are there, and there's always injuries. So there's more and more guys always coming in, at least 5 or, maybe 5 guys are new every single week. And then you've got how many trainers, how many coaches, defensive back, left defensive back coach, right side defensive back, like defensive coordinator, defensive assistant coordinator. How many expand, like every one of these NFL teams or whether they're like 100 guys in these teams. And so like, one guy that comes into this team, like how is he may never even meet. He may never even have a conversation with a guy on the other side of the team. Like, like they're so massive. Like imagine, really you could say like 55 players of the team plus 5 or 6 for injuries, cycling in, plus like, let's say 15, 20 coaches. So like at minimum, you got 60, 70 people in an organization that travels around and stuff. 60, that seems like a lot of people to like really get to know, especially in where like it be, where there's trades and all these things that happen, in a season. And that's what I loved about what he said, which is less players meant a closer team bond. When you got 25 guys and 17 are playing on at any given time, you really get to know the person that you're playing with. You really get to know, and especially when me and Jamie, even before you joined, we're on here, Tom. We spent a great deal of time talking about about how these players really gelled with Potsy Clark. So anyways, and that's what I'm saying. Like when you have a smaller number of guys, and they're playing year after year after year with this goal of winning this championship, and they lose a couple guys and they're replaced with a couple more guys that they think are going to help them get there. You have like a core group of guys. And I think that to me is my favorite thing about sports, is where you have this like core group of guys and they're in this, like they're trading out pieces to figure out how this core group, with their new supporting cast is going to make this happen. That's like my favorite sports story. And that's what this team was.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they
Dutch Clark,
Dutch Clark,
all these guys. Yeah.
How many times did he play defense when they were short? When they were
He was one of their top starters.
Yeah. One of the players went down and he was going to go in.
Yeah. Dutch Clark in 34, when they said Dutch Clark at the end of 1934 on offense and defense in the last few games of the year, like that he should have been in a hospital bed. Like he was so mangled from all the time he played. But he was still running out there. Potsy had to run him out there against the Packers. You know what I mean? Like that's why in the 35 he had this freshman versus varsity preseason game to try to identify new talent because his starters, his core group were so mangled going at the end of 1934. That's why they faded. Think about it. They had 7 games in a row where they were unscored upon, 10 straight wins. 10 straight wins, and then they folded at the end of the year. They lost I think they lost their last 3 games.
They were whipped.
Exactly, they were torn up. That's why 35 Potsy had to find enough new blood to augment his supporting cast, and they got to a slow start because he had to use these new guys to get him to the end of the year where his core group. We could finally unleash him, and that's what he did. And they took him all the way to the championship.
And they're doing it all for $135 a game.
Really, that's it.
So, it's a quick
teaching job or something.
I got a simple calculator, and it says the $135 in 1935 today is about $2,600.
Yeah,
so, if it's a 13-game season, that's like a $30,000 salary.
Yeah.
So most of them had like a teaching job or car sales.
Well, we talked about before
insurance.
Presnell even talked about like when he signed a contract, one of the benefits of signing with whatever particular team was that they would set him up with a job in an off season after the season was over.
Ed Kushner went to work for General Motors and he ended up with a dealership in Palo Alto, California.
Yeah, a lot of the Red Wings guys, same thing. Was Jim Norris has set these guys up with all these off season great jobs. Like he was. Like Normie Smith was a limo driver. He was like the driver for I forgot which. I talked to it. I can't wait till we get to the Red Wings section because I met I know Norma Smith. Norma Smith, the daughter. Normie Smith is the goalie. His daughter is Norma Smith, and I'm friends with her. That's where I got a ton of my information. Was Normie Smith had the greatest newspaper Normie Smith, the goalie of the Red Wings, kept every single newspaper for his entire career. Every single newspaper clipping about the Red Wings.
Wow.
His entire career. She has like this encyclopedia. She let me. I came over and met her, and she's got this. She's like, yeah, come on over. So like I say, like when she was telling me that her father was like, in the off season, his job was he was like I forgot which. I got to look in the book to remind me, but he had a driver he was a driver for some big executive for one of the auto companies.
Wow.
That's how he was able to come out to Detroit. So that's how these guys, all these different athletes, they get jobs in a lot of cases better jobs than they would if they were just part of the part of the random group of people looking for a random job. They get executive jobs, car dealership jobs, good spots.
Well, the oldest player in the National Football League is Cy Souders, who played with the Lions, and I went to school with his daughter, and he told me that he played 2 years with the Lions. And then in the summer and the off season, he would sell cars, and he thought that selling the cars was a lot better than being slammed on that football field.
Sure.
And he ended up selling cars. That's probably why he's 100 years old today.
But you see what I'm saying? But at the same time, is like when you're playing a game like George Richards, who owns the Lions, right? He's one of a syndicate of 20 different owners, and these are the biggest movers and shakers in Detroit. And you're playing on the team, and they're promising you if you come to Detroit and play with this team that you're going to be able to we're going to get you a job in the off season. Like, oh really? What job am I going to get? And they're like, the ownership of this team is 20 of the biggest movers and shakers in this city.
Right.
All right. So these are going to be the people that are going to we're going to find a job for you amongst one of their 20 companies. Right. So do you want to take your chances with coming and playing for the Lions in Detroit, or do you want to just line up with the other, 50 people at the, unemployment office that are just looking for a job, picking apples or something, like that's what I mean. That the attraction of something like that was huge for these people at that time, which are They're looking for income, man. They're looking. This is a different time.
The championship game in 35. Each player, the winner, the Giants were the loser, but the winner, the Lions, got $926 each.
And that parka, and a
parka,
and a trip to Hawaii because they played a series of exhibition games.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got a picture in the book that shows them on.
They were just overpaid, weren't they?
Yeah.
Spoiled.
But to people back in the 30s though that saw them getting all these bonuses and stuff, they're like those rich athletes, so they don't have any idea what us common folk have to go through. So as I say, like every generation they always look back and go, they're always looking back going, oh, they didn't get paid anything. But at the time, same thing. Like, we look back at our athletes, we're going, oh, they're overpaid and all this. What do you think? They said the same thing back in the 30s about their guys going, there's the Lions go to Hawaii. They got new parkas, they
said their summer was a lot better than 34 summer.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like they're probably saying the same thing. The fans back then going, those rich athletes have no idea how us common folk have to live. Like you see, they get the money, they got the trip to Hawaii, and they got the parkas. It's like totally rich, those rich jerks.
So Klewicki was talking about playing both sides of the ball, because you were just talking about these guys just being Iron Men, and for that pay, they were versatile. They had to play both sides because sometimes they were down players. Anything about Klewicki that to lead this?
Well, yeah, we talked about this was the last. This last week was the 2 weeks ago before our last for our last episode. We talked about Ed Klewicki. He's the guy from Michigan State.
Yeah,
he was the MSU first Michigan State Spartan to play for the Lions. Of course, the first U of M player to play for the Lions was Chuck Bernard.
Right.
First MSU is Ed Klewicki, and we talked about him. Anybody wants to hear details on Ed Klewicki, go back to their last episode. We're not trying to we got to direct them back to our old shows. We're not going to go through Ed Klewicki again.
All right.
We love him to death.
But here's Ed talking about playing both sides.
Okay, fine. And now, Ed, your reflections? Yes. My reflections on the biggest difference is naturally the money. However, I heard a lot of remarks about the difference in the size. Well, that was the difference in the game, going two ways. And I would just like to see some of these people that are playing today go run 3 passes and then punt and run down under a punt and then get up and get ready for that sweep that they're running in their direction, and see how much condition they have and how much they regard the size as the governing factor about how good you can do on the field. Also, I always thought, and nobody I don't think that teaches blocking will ever, or tackling, will disagree with the fact that if you're underneath, you're in a hell of a lot better position than you are above on a football field. Thank you.
He, after the interview, he said that he would watch the current games today, and he would watch the defense, and the commentators would say, oh, the defense has been on there for 5 minutes, and they're exhausted, and they're going over to the sideline. He said, what a joke. Yeah. Every time I heard that, he said, what a joke.
This right here, this is one of my favorite things that in the entire interview that you had. And we're
going to wrap it up with this one.
Sure.
Today.
But this is one of my favorite components. I actually wish we had more time. Maybe we should start off next episode with it because this is one of my favorite quotes of the entire thing. And the reason is because modern day fans, whenever we look at the 1930s, a lot of times players look at them and they say that, the fans look at them, they like, look at how primitive they were. They wore the leather helmets. They look kind of smaller. Like I could probably wreck that guy if I was back then, right? There's just there's such a modern day arrogance versus when you look at the players of the past. They're like, oh man, those were back in the weaker, smaller, whatever days, whatever like this. And this is the reason why, and that's why I love this quote right here, because what he says is he's saying everybody talks about how we would do if we played against modern day athletes. But how would they do if they played our game?
Right.
Where they played both ways every single down. If you were a quarterback, you had to be able to kick field goals. You had to be able to punt. You had to be able to pass, run the ball. You had to be able to do everything. Play defense, be safety, be everything. And you had to play every single down for an entire game.
60 minutes.
60 minutes every single game. Potsy Clark, so you had the one quote where Red Stacy's going, they played me 57 minutes, 58 minutes in my first two games, and I wanted to win that. Potsy said I'd get a hat if I played for 60 minutes. So I played, I begged Jack Johnson to leave me in there for the last 2 minutes of the third game.
Never got his hat.
Yeah, 60. So that's what I'm saying. So this right here, he's saying everybody says in the modern day, we might not be able to face off against a 330-pound defensive tackle. But if you took that same 330-pound defensive tackle and brought him back to the 1930s, how would he do there?
Yeah.
The conditioning and be able to play and
he'd be
function.
Sucking wind after 5 plays.
Exactly.
That's
the very first couple of plays off the game, sure, the guy would be wrecking ball. But after that, when he's got to go 60 minutes, you know what I mean? You hit it right there, Tom, where he says after 5 minutes, you're going, oh man, they've been on the field for a long time. 60 minutes. Yeah. It was a totally different, different game back then. And that's where I love where he says, when you have to do all of these things for an entire 60 minutes games, he's like, then is when you're going to find out is how much size is a governing factor of the ability and talent of a player. And that's why I love that quote. If anybody takes anything from this interview, I think that is one of the 2 signature moments of this clip of this interview.
It's an honor to do it. I'm telling you, I was very fortunate.
So it's you enjoyed sitting down with them guys?
Oh, you can tell the background. They were cracked there.
They were all, it was at the reunion. It was roughly 3:00 in the morning, and they were having some fun, and the music was still going, and they were just flat out having fun.
Yeah, and that goes back to the previous moment where they're saying how the team was closer together because there was less players.
Right.
And we've talked, and this has been a common theme whenever we talked about is how these guys they knew each other, they cared about each other. 50 years later, they're still want to have a championship celebration together. And at the championship celebration, they're having a party, man. They're drinking and laughing, remember old times. Because the teams were smaller. Yeah. They that's what I'm saying. That is one of the modern day things that I think one of the things that's lost from some of the modern day games is the transience of the players in every once in a while you see how you have a core group of guys that's built. That's not completely lost, but I think that needs to be emphasized more is the core group of guys who comes up together, and that's the team who wins together.
Well, basically they had to know their own plays, because with 20-some players, if you're down to 17, all of a sudden I'm an in, and I got to play left tackle, or I got to play right guard. It makes a big difference.
So this core group of guys is going to be back again next week to talk more about this because we have a couple more clips to listen to.
Sure.
Tom, we want more stories from you. And my favorite part of this is watching Tom listen to these interviews and kind of relive.
And that's Tom on the tape.
He lights up every time we play one of these. It's awesome. So we thank everybody for joining us. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, if you comment during the show, you get a mention.
Had an interesting comment, and we're going to get to it. Just kind of tease you with it. We were talking about Glenn Presnell. Mike Presnell left a comment on one of our YouTube videos.
Great.
So thanks to Mike for listening, and we'll get to that comment next time. A first cousin once removed.
Actually, we're gonna dive deeper into that.
We'll talk about Mike Presnell.
This is a show. That's what I love about this show too. Is that we're talking about this is like a sports talk radio show. We're talking about Detroit sports history. You know what I mean? All these other sports talkers are modern day Lions, these other guys got fired, whatever. We're back in the day talking about sports, we're like, man, can you believe Presnell? These guys, we're talking about stuff that happened. It's almost like this is the show that should have been when the 30s were happening.
Absolutely, because in the 30s they just didn't have sports talk.
If in
the 30s, if it existed, probably Detroit would be the sports center of all time. Because everybody was. Name the sport: tennis, bowling.
That's what I'm saying.
We're motorboat race,
absolutely.
Football. It's fencing.
Yeah,
it just goes.
Speak my language, Tom. We're gonna be speaking all these. We're talking all this,
and more of it to come. Yeah. It's Detroit City of Champions, DetroitCityOfChampions.com, and we'll be back next time. Thanks for being with us.